Hello, I'm David Rives, and this is the Genesis Science Report. Tonight we'll talk with an emergency room physician on his experience at a New York City hospital during the pandemic with some shocking first-hand accounts. We're also taking viewer questions, tackling the subject of animals during the time of the Great Flood. But first, let's talk about education. Now, I don't mean research or experience or field work or training or growing in knowledge. I'm talking about the education that you can get from colleges for the price of a nice house. I'm talking about the higher learning that you can get from a recognized institution and still be paying for it when you hit 50. Now, I don't have a college degree, although I have been known to employ a number of people who do. In fact, the majority of my friends and colleagues have PhDs in some scientific field. Over the past 13 years, many of them have shared their knowledge with me, advised me, and offered their support on my journey as our ministry grew to be the largest creation media ministry in the world. In addition, a survey sent to the hundreds of thousands of my friends and ministry followers, shows that over 50% of those most involved in our ministry have advanced degrees, masters and doctorates in theology and science and philosophy. I'm proud of them and what they've accomplished. But I've never attended a recognized institution for higher learning. Now, I've written 2 books, I've been on speaking tours around the world, and hosted and produced over 800 pieces of media, including 350 global television programs and major documentaries seen by countless millions. I can't credit a college degree for that. There's no doubt that I've been blessed, and I give all glory to the Lord. Here's the thing. Today, the radical left humanists are obsessed with higher education. Now, what do I mean by humanists? I'm talking about those who believe that it's all about them, those who downplay or outright reject the concept and the importance of God. Why would these people be so adamant in their push for credentialed degrees and college experience? Jeremy Boring, the COO of the top 10 news organization Daily Wire, and also a man with no college degree, recently stated, "Colleges exist primarily to create conformity of thought." Now, I believe that this is a profound statement. It's no secret that those employed as biology professors in U.S. colleges and universities are overwhelmingly anti-religious. Over 60% are self-professed atheists or agnostics. This means that their humanist agenda is pushed on young students who are eager to learn. The thing is, what are they learning? Are they learning to think for themselves, to discern, study facts, and debate ideas freely? Or are they simply spoon-fed a diet of radical left propaganda, an ideology that is decidedly anti-biblical, anti-life, anti-freedom of speech, and anti-Christian? This is not a Republican versus Democrat issue. It is perhaps a conservative versus liberal issue. This is between those who push radical liberal ideology and those who want to conserve biblical principles and the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. A right that was given not by government, but by God Himself. You see, our founding fathers knew this well. We are endowed by our Creator with those rights, and it's not negotiable. They considered this to be so important that they actually wrote it in the Declaration of Independence. Men have spilled their blood to preserve those rights, but we're now told to be tolerant. Those who came to America were told to tolerate the tyranny of the King of England. They were told to just get along or face persecution. Some college professors now use the same intimidation tactics when it comes to the religious beliefs of students. The founding fathers of America were highly intelligent men, but the truth is today the highly educated are those who are leading the charge of blurring the lines between gender, of inciting racial hatred, and worst of all, teaching that we're cosmic accidents, merely the product of time, natural selection, and chance. This is having a negative impact on our society during a time when teen suicide, we've got rampant atheism, veteran suicide, mass shooting sprees, and depression are all on the rise. If we are merely nothing more than intelligent animals, well, why should we value human life? And relativistic morality means we get to decide our own truths It's a pattern of the very lie of Satan in the garden. He tempted Eve with the humanistic thought, if we make our own rules, well, then we can be our own God. Sadly, seminaries and theological institutions don't fare much better than the secular institutions. A Barna study of U.S. Protestant pastors revealed that the pastors least likely to have a biblical worldview are those who are seminary graduates. Over 50% of seminary-trained pastors now admit that their beliefs are not consistent with the biblical worldview. In other words, they answered no to at least one of the following. Do you believe that absolute moral truth exists, that it's based upon the Bible, that the Bible is accurate in its teachings, that Jesus was sinless, that Satan literally exists, that God is omnipotent and omniscient, that we're saved by grace through faith and not of works, and that we have a personal responsibility to evangelize? Listen, over half of the pastors with higher education answered no. Let me be clear, this is not an attack on education. It is a criticism of the effectiveness and the tactics that the currently accepted system for education is using. Again, I applaud those who have made it through the higher education system with their values and personal opinions intact. But statistics are making the sad reality clear. We have many generations of indoctrinated and confused men and women who are positioned as authorities in their respective fields. Not all of them have fallen for the humanistic trap set by their professors, but unfortunately, it is a majority. This is what we're up against. This is why our ministry providing biblical truth is so crucial and why we need your prayers and support now more than ever before. This brings us to our featured product of the week, which is a case in point to the bias of the education system. My good friend Dr. Jerry Bergman is a prolific author of books on Darwin and the dangers and lasting effects that Darwin's ideas have had on our culture today. I might add, this is also a book that showcases how those who are openly religious and Bible-believing Christians are censored. Although most had qualifications, degrees, and credentials, their voices are purposely being stopped so that they cannot teach in higher learning facilities, colleges, and universities. His book, Censoring the Darwin Skeptics, is the third volume of a trilogy that documents cases of discrimination handed out to individuals, 60 of whom held PhDs, who dared to challenge Darwinian concepts within many venues of science and academia. For those who think that this type of discrimination is minor or inconsequential, you should examine this work. This type of discrimination is not rare by any means in America, but it's been consistently on the rise for decades. It represents nothing less than the brutal violation of freedom of speech, thought, and religious freedom for those who are qualified to practice in their field. You can pick up this title and many more resources from the Creation Superstore by visiting creationsuperstore.com or calling 931-212-7990. And now for the comment corner. Michelle says, I was really overwhelmed with all of the biblical archaeological findings out there today and trying to understand it on my own through volumes of library research. But David Rives Ministries helps me to close the gap with thorough overviews on topics about the Bible and scientific evidence. Thank you for that. This is what we attempt to do every week through Creation in the 21st Century. It airs on Trinity Broadcasting Network every Saturday. Check your local listings. I interview brilliant minds and we discuss things like this on an intellectual level. One more from Sarah online who said, this ministry has greatly helped me in my faith by helping to answer several questions and doubts that I had. I wasn't sure how the Bible fit with what I was taught in school. I didn't want to completely give it up, so I was plagued with thoughts and theories about how they could fit together. But now I know they really don't. What I was taught was completely wrong and biased. I'm so happy I've been able to see that. I'm much more comfortable in what I believe now, and it's helped me really see the beauty in God's creation. I think this is great for any Christian who has been fed contradictory, quote, facts and doesn't know what to do with them. This is especially good for younger people who are going through school, who are beginning to question what they believe, like I was. Listen, Sarah, this is actually another case in point. This happens all of the time. This is what students are faced with on a daily, sometimes a daily basis. It depends on what field you're going in. This is the reason our ministry exists. Now for this week's ministry update. In our last episode of Genesis Science Report, we talked about the newly discovered Darth Vader bug and the tremendous devastation and regrowth that's taken place at Mount St. Helens that erupted 40 years ago this year. The most recent Genesis Science Report has been viewed about 100,000 times. In these reports, we bring you breaking current news and discoveries in science and the world. So share this video with all of your friends so they can learn as well. Be sure to like and subscribe to our social media platforms, YouTube, Facebook. We have hundreds of thousands of you out there communicating on a daily basis. We're offering encouragement, education, and support on how you can defend your Christian faith. This week's question comes from AJ Walleye on TikTok. They ask, if there were dinosaurs around when Noah was, why didn't he put any on the ark? Thank you, AJ, for that question. Let's look at it from a theological level here and break down what the Bible says. Also, let's define dinosaurs. Okay, so the Bible does not mention dinosaurs by name. That's because our English Bibles were written before the word dinosaur existed. The word dinosaur is a modern word. Before then, many people used dragons. You do read about dragons, behemoth, and leviathan in the scriptures, actually scattered all throughout the Bible, which seems to be referring to creatures that we would call dinosaurs today. All right, but the definition of dinosaur means that it is a creature that breathes air and walks on land. Well, Genesis, I believe it's 7:14, tells us that Noah brought in all of the kinds of animals, the basic families of animals, that breathed air and walked on land. That would include dinosaurs. Now, when dinosaurs got off the ark, many of them were probably juveniles. They probably had a long lifespan ahead of them, but ecological niches were hard to fill by these giant creatures. Small lizards, other reptiles, of course, made it through. But dinosaurs, sadly, for the most part, went extinct pretty quickly after the flood. They would have, if we believe the Bible, they would have gone onto the ark and gotten off. And that's the question and answer for the week. Join in on the conversation by sending your questions via email, Facebook, and YouTube, and we'll try to address them in a future program. Joining me in studio today is Dr. Chuck Thurston of Science and Wonders. Dr. Thurston is an emergency room physician with over 30 years of experience. Between medical mission trips and long night shifts in the ER, he has traveled the world documenting many of the infallible proofs that confirm the biblical record. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Tell me just a little bit about the COVID-19 situation, because you have firsthand experience, I hear.
Yes. This mask is about as effective as keeping the tiny 1 micron size COVID-19 coronavirus out as a chain link fence would be to keep mosquitoes out.
Okay.
And it comes around the edges and the sides. And when you wear a mask, there's a problem with it, because people typically wear them like Amish beards.
Yeah.
They're doing neck protection.
I've definitely seen that.
They have yarmulke masks. They have mustache masks where the nose sticks out, and it doesn't do any good because
a lot of people are doing
your nose.
that. Yep.
And it gets wet from your mouth, and you have to touch it. So the way COVID is spread is somebody coughs on a table or their hands, they touch the table, you touch the table, and then you fiddle with your mask without washing your hands.
So you've just put the COVID-19 on the mask,
up
on
near,
a wet mask.
And then if I breathe deeply, if I touch it, if I touch my nose, it's just a mess.
Okay.
And it's very uncomfortable, and it would be better if everybody would just wash their hands a lot and not touch your face. It's okay to wear a mask. It will prevent a person with it from spreading it a little bit.
If they wear the mask correctly.
All these personal protective devices, anti-social distancing, it's not social distancing, it's anti-social distancing. All of these things that we're doing do flatten the curve. So here's the curve, you flatten the curve, and when you flatten the curve, what happens with a flat curve? The area under the curve stays the same, and so the onslaught in the ICUs and the emergency departments and the hospitals is dampened, and so you don't have an overrun. You don't have a run on the bank, but you still have the same number of cases ultimately.
So are you saying that? Do you believe that herd immunity is one way of getting through this situation?
Herd immunity produces a vaccination.
Okay.
If a person gets coronavirus and it's a terrible case and they might even die from it, the virus cannot make itself. This is important, it's not being emphasized in the press. Viruses cannot manufacture or reproduce their own RNA or DNA. Coronavirus is an RNA virus like Ebola and hantavirus and SARS and H1N1, and those are all RNA viruses. They're also very hard to make vaccinations for because they're RNA. They're not DNA viruses, it's different.
Okay. Yeah.
Never in the course of infectious disease or epidemics or fighting things have we quarantined healthy people and told them to not go to work. We quarantine sick people to keep them out of the main population, and we protect people who are vulnerable, like nursing home patients. So not only did we shut down all of industry, but we focused and forced contagious people into a very vulnerable population of nursing home patients.
We see that this has impacted the world,
Right.
so we're talking not
I'm not
just our
talking any one
country.
person, I'm not blaming anybody, that's what happened.
You're a medical doctor. You've actually seen, this is not a hoax. This virus is
No,
very
people
real
die.
for some people.
Yes, people die, and it's serious, and even one death is bad. But there's no reason to shut down the entire culture and make suicide go up, drug overdoses go up, people not getting standard care for heart attacks and strokes. How many people have we lost to heart attacks and strokes and cancer treatments that because they didn't get treated, they canceled their quote elective surgery? How many people have been labeled as non-essential? Who's non-essential? I mean, I'm an essential worker because I'm a doctor. Woo. And now they're calling all us medical people heroes. I didn't want to be a hero because if I'm a hero, somebody has to be a victim. And I don't want to be a hero to a bunch of victims until I found out that they were going to give a tax credit for working in a COVID hospital, which I did. So I thought, okay, I'm a hero. Just because of the tax incentive.
You've been to New York.
Yeah, I worked in Flushing Meadows at the Billie Jean King COVID hospital. It was a Billie Jean King 470 beds in Flushing Meadow at the site of the 1964 World's Fair, which I attended when I was 12.
This was one of these hospitals developed specifically for COVID victims.
FEMA built it and contracted for it and worked with a very good organization, Caliburn, that assembled 470 excellent medical personnel. I had more fun talking to these people, learned I should get continuing education for the stuff I learned from these people.
How much can you reveal? Did you have to treat a lot of patients? You were in New York.
Right. No, we did not.
Okay.
And if I told you any more, I'd have to shoot you, so I can't. It's a HIPAA violation to say too much about that. But none of us got sick.
Okay.
2 people went home because they were afraid. But I thought that was odd that the medical personnel did not succumb to this.
What are the symptoms that you've seen for those who actually did have this virus?
Well, a symptom is something you say you have, and a sign is something you can objectively prove. This is an important distinction. The symptoms we would see is runny nose, cold, flu, aches and pains, and cough, especially a cough, and a high fever. Fever as high as 104. The fever is killing the virus. Viruses do not do well in high temperatures. So stop treating everybody with Tylenol and aspirin to get the fever down, because it's the defense mechanism your body is using under the inalienable right to happiness that it has. And it tries to combat the virus by making it too hot.
So how long can you survive? How long can you healthfully survive with an extended high fever?
A long time.
Okay.
But you want to treat fevers if you get seizures from them, if it makes you delirious, if it alters your mental status, that needs to be treated. You don't need to make it worse. The most common cause of spread of the virus, although it is capable of being spread by aerosol in the air, the most common cause is coughing on your hand and touching another person, or touching, and they touch their face. It's hand-to-mouth contact.
Physical contact.
But that's not to say that it doesn't occur by aerosol form. It does. It's not a waste of time or worthless to use a mask, but it's not very effective. With each person who dies of coronavirus, the FEMA will pay $37,000 for that corpse to reimburse the hospital for its trouble and for the dangers. And they established that. The Congress passed a law, the FEMA distributes the funds, and hospitals have every reason to make a person have COVID. But a lot of people died with COVID, but not of COVID.
Interesting.
And then they talk about all the cases. We have a huge increase in the number of cases. Of course, people they rioted, they spit on each other. They weren't using masks. They weren't washing their hands. People weren't washing their hands before they throw a Molotov cocktail at you. They were spreading the virus, and that was okay because it was their freedom of speech. But no, you can't go to church, or you can't open your business, you can't open your beauty parlor.
When you start suppressing religious freedoms.
So they ignored a virus, quick, let's just dump the Bill of Rights. And so that same right that's granted to us was granted to the cells to sabotage it. Each new cell that gets infected, each new person, each new victim, makes a worse copy of the virus. The virus isn't making its own copy, that's why it can't mutate, really. These aren't mutations, these are sabotages. These are intentional malassembly, misassembly, wrong sequences of RNA, wrong sequences of amino acids and proteins. And so pretty soon you have a Xerox copy of a Xerox copy of a Xerox copy. About 3 or 4 down the line, you can't even tell you're sick, you have to get a test to find out. And then what test? The test results have been just across the board, it's crazy.
What about asymptomatic cases? Because we see this testing done, and many people are tested positive, but have little to no symptoms that they can recall.
Right, which means they also don't have signs, which means they could be infectious. They could give somebody else that virus, but that's the virus you want. That's the one that gives you, it's a vaccination. It's not really herd immunity, it's serial vaccination by disabled cells, by disabled viruses who've been sabotaged and ruined in the process. As it burns through the population, it burns out. That's why everybody's not dying of Ebola, hantavirus, H1N1, SARS, you name it. And it gets to the point where you have the mortality of like rhinovirus, which is the common cold. It doesn't start that way. And what happens is when the coagulation factors are used up because of the cytokine storm, they use up coagulation factors, and so when it comes time for the blood to be able to need to coagulate, the supply of coagulation factors has been used up. So you get a condition called DIC, disseminated intravascular coagulopathy. Okay. And so you have small, tiny peripheral clots, but when the lungs need the blood to clot to not fill the lung tissue, they just roars in like a flood. The air sacs fill up with fluid and you drown. It's a terrible way to go. It's a serious disease. It's just not that common.
Let's talk about from a Christian perspective. You're a Christian. I believe that there has been a lot of ungodly fear. I've said it time and time again concerning this. Not that it is not extremely serious, not that people have not died. It is a horrible thing. But at the same time, where do we draw the line on allowing fear to rule our lives?
Perfect love casts out all fear. I went into that environment full of people who were infected with COVID, not the least bit worried that the Lord would not protect me. I did, Jesus said we have to our righteousness has to exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees, with whom he disagreed. But he also sent the lepers who, back to the same Levites, who were going to participate in his crucifixion in a few weeks. But he honored the medical system. He didn't disrespect it. It's something he put in place. And so we need to respect the authority, wear the mask if that's what they want, but don't think for a minute that's going to make any difference. But it's not going to hurt to get along with people. That's what I do. I try to wear that. In the Black Death of the 13th century, the 14th century, the 1347 to 1355 across Europe, it wiped out more than a third, almost a half of Europe died.
Wow.
And they could have prevented it, and they were given biblical warning. As a Christian, we should take a lesson from the scriptures. That was not a virus. That was caused by Yersinia pestis, which is a bacteria that causes the Black Death or bubonic plague or pneumonic plague. And it is spread by fleas on the back of rats and mice. And all of Europe was overwhelmed with filth in the streets, and the rats and the mice were prevalent.
This reminds me of a command that the Lord gave the Israelites. It said to separate the diseased people from out of the camp.
Right.
Until they're able to get, this is like a quarantine, but it is a quarantine for the sick.
Right. Quarantine comes from the Greek word, from the Latin word for 40 days. The Dozers in Venice kept the ships offshore for 40 days and made sure everybody in the ship was still healthy before they would let them unload. And so the quarantine is the Latin phrase for 40 days. So that's where that comes from.
You think that the world would be a whole lot better off if we would wash our hands more often? Wash
your hands and don't touch your hands and mouth. We have a runner invention. This is a great scientific invention. It's a breakthrough. It's called a fork, a spoon, a knife. And they're made out of silver. And silver are bacteriostatic and virucidal, and the silver will kill all kinds of microorganisms. So you take a metal object that you can scrub clean and boil, and then eat your food with that instead of touching your finger to your mouth. And that's an amazing thing to eat with silverware, isn't it? I mean, we should probably do more of that.
When Moses and the Israelites were wandering through the wilderness, actually at the mountain of the Lord, the Lord provided simple commands. Now, these commands were not to try to oppress them, not to try to see if he could get them to break his commands, but instead for their own good, including things like separating the disease from the camp, like bathing in running water, more effective at removing microbes. But let's talk about that for 1 second before we go, because to me, we know that this was written before germ theory came about in the 1800s, and it appears to be good health practices related to what we could relate to germ theory. How could Moses have known about these things unless a divine wisdom had given him these words?
God loves us, and he tells us things, and he doesn't have to tell us why. He didn't have to tell them about bacteria. He had to tell them about soap and water. What is there to fear? I mean, Roosevelt was right. There's nothing to fear except fear itself. So the economy has been shut down. We have increased numbers of suicides and medical problems because we've destroyed the whole system. We've destroyed the economy. We've destroyed transportation. We've destroyed freedom. We've destroyed the right to assemble. We've destroyed churches because of the fear of the coronavirus, not because of the coronavirus. Coronavirus has done a tiny amount of damage, less than 1 in a million. Tiny amount of damage. The Black Death did a half to a third of Europe.
Wow.
And that was a bacteria. This is a virus. So I've used hydroxychloroquine for weird pneumonias and things for 40 years, maybe 50 years almost. So we used to use it a lot for malaria and parasites and things. And everybody was afraid to use it because it might cause AFib. Well, I looked at a cardiologist who was objecting to that at Billie Jean King, and I said, AFib is better than asystole. Your heart stops if we don't do something.
Right.
So I don't know how that's going to pan out, but as soon as the president mentions something, it's attacked immediately. And I see a conspiracy to try to keep him from being in power and make him look stupid at every round. And I think he's behaved exactly properly. Even doing the shutdowns and the lockdowns and all that I don't like, he has to do that. I don't think he's made a mistake. I think God is guiding him, and we just pray for him and pray for his continued survival, pray for his wisdom, pray that God will give the doctors wisdom and see through this scare tactic. There's no reason to scare people. There's nothing to be afraid of. And
pray
if you're
for
a
our
Christian,
leaders' wisdom.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thanks.
And that's it for today. Thank you for joining us on the Genesis Science Report. We'll see you next time. I'm David Rives. Keep looking up. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.